Good morning, good afternoon. Hello campers. Thanks for joining the third and final NCSI Summer Camp webinar series. I'm John Bartz, one of your camp counselors, and welcome to today's activity with Palo Alto Networks Traps. With me today is Robert Kemeny, Senior Network Engineer at NCSI, and Kyle Chugg, Cybersecurity Engineer at Palo Alto Networks. Good morning, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you guys, and we can get started. Take it away.
Thank you. We're excited to be here, NCSI and Palo Alto Networks, and talk a little bit about traps, endpoint protection, and really what that can do for you guys, and some of the feature sets, and why it's a next-gen piece of software that you want on your endpoints to help secure against malware and exploits.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Thanks for coming today. We're going to talk about Palo Alto Networks' solution of traps. First of all, set the stage a little bit. I mean, over the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, really the endpoint landscape has changed really heavily. Obviously, we know that major threat actors typically like to get their foothold into your network by compromising endpoints. And it's definitely been one of the biggest vectors into companies and organizations in order to compromise or exfiltrate data, whatever their ultimate goal is or their objectives to meet. So we really have to put a lot more thought into how we're going to do this. We used to rely heavily on signature-based type technology. But as many of you know, and probably most of you know, that doesn't scale anymore. For all the different, I mean, we're seeing an average of 100x on a monthly basis, as far as 100 times more malware events and files and even more exploit techniques than we used to see. So it's really, the threat landscape has changed, and traditional technology to detect and prevent or even respond to these type of events has really changed, and there's been a real big need for it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about this. There's kind of a wide dynamic, a wide spectrum, I guess you could say, of different technologies in this space. We've got, on one side of the fence, we've got products that are heavily focused on detection and response with some functionality of prevention capabilities or even maybe response capabilities after the fact. And then more of what traps is focused on is on the other side of the dynamic or the spectrum, is all about prevention. We focus on preventing exploits and malware through many different multi-methods in order to prevent the attack life cycle at any point in that attack life cycle. So we're heavily focused on prevention, and I actually think that's probably the ultimate goal for everybody. It's nice to have a little bit of the, I guess you could say, flight recorder, black box flight recorder DVR of events, and kind of visualize some of those events. But ultimately, the goal for everybody is to not have your endpoints compromised and to keep malicious files and exploits out of your network. And so that's the focus today, and that we're going to talk about. One of the reasons I joined Palo Alto Networks, so I recently, just early 2018, joined the Palo Alto Networks team. I did so because I love the company culture, innovation, and technology and products. So I've loved every minute of what I've been doing. But I've been on your side of the fence. Years ago, I was with a large financial institution, and then my last stop was about 9 years, almost 10 years at an energy company. So I've been through the gamut of what you guys deal with and trying to build enough layers of security to prevent your company from being compromised and credentials stolen and data exfiltrated or defacement down to, I know what you're going through. I've been in the weeds, and it's not easy. But with Traps endpoint detection, we're trying to help you. First of all, we've built a brand new console interface that we host. Very easy to stand up, deploy. The default policies are excellent. As far as just starting off, ready to go. There's not a lot of tuning and tweaking to do with traps. And our focus is multi-method prevention and pre-execution prevention of malware and exploits. We don't want to have it execute on your environment, analyze it, and then try and clean up or the mess that happened afterwards. Our focus is on prevent it from happening in the first place. You don't have to clean up all those registry settings. You don't have to wipe and re-image boxes all the time, so that you can focus on your everyday, day-to-day activities and not worry about the exploitation and compromise of your endpoints. So to talk a little bit about how that multi-method technology works, we use a combination of, if you're from, hopefully many of you that have listened or been a part of Palo Alto's technology understanding, we have our Wildfire Intelligence Cloud, which is one of the largest intelligence gathering or databases, I guess you could call it, in the industry. We take, I talk to many of our customers about Palo Alto's security operating platform and the many different solutions outside the firewall that we have. But even the firewall and traps and Aperture and many of the different products we have, I call them sensors, because they all talk to this centralized Wildfire portal, and all the indicators of compromise, the hashes, the behaviors, heuristics, all of that information, the URLs, domains, you name it, all that information gets shipped to Wildfire. And so we're able to take events that are happening across the world, and we see these are new threats or new files. Obviously, those customers are sending and submitting those to Wildfire, and within 5 minutes, that information is disseminated down to all of our other customers, so that we can take the unknown that we didn't know about halfway across the world, make it known, distribute that to our customers, and prevent that from ever even attempting to get into their environment. So that's a big part of it, how it works. We've also, from our Wildfire Intelligence Cloud, built our machine learning. So we've been able to build algorithms of math, because we have so many samples of good and bad files to analyze and apply an intelligence around in order to put an agent on our machines and add that math, that machine learning, onto our traps agent and prevent that way as well. That helps us with the unknown malware, because we can analyze that and prevent it from executing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the demo and how that works. And our third technique is blocking exploits. There's only a finite amount of techniques that are used when the threat actors are trying to exploit your endpoints. They typically, they'll reuse them. There's not a lot of zero-day exploits that come out. Well, there's quite a few actually that come out, but they use the same techniques. So if you take WannaCry example, the exploit used in the WannaCry attacks, our customers are using traps were already protected at least over 18 months before that, because we already had that technique built in, and we only have about 22 exploit techniques that are built into traps, and we've been around for about less than 5 years. So we typically add 1 or 2 a year of those. Now we're adding a few more because of our capabilities on support with Linux and Android and a few of those kind of things, but those are not very common to add. Many of the exploit techniques are all encompassed into all those 22 techniques that we use.
So Kyle, you're talking about things like heat spray and spawn exploit and those kinds of things. Those are just reused over and over again with each of the variants for malware that come out, right?
Right. So using all those same techniques apply to all the different zero-day exploits that come out. We don't see new ones that come out very often. And when we do, we create a new, what we call exploit prevention module, and add it to it, and then we've got that capability. So yeah, there's a lot of different ones. And we also include some of our ransomware prevention kind of capabilities, because that's definitely top of mind in the industry of what's happening. Ransomware is big, and so are the crypto miners and things of that nature. The reason we've done this and continue to innovate on these techniques and capabilities of malware and exploits is because we believe that you have to be able to stop the building blocks of the attack lifecycle. If you're able to thwart the exploit from happening in your environment, then they can't drop the malware payload. And inversely, if somebody's trying to just put a link to a website or a watering hole to deliver a payload from that, you've got to be able to, if there's not an exploit attached to it, it's just a file and detonate it or whatever it may be, then you've got to have capabilities to block known malware and unknown malware, and that's what we're all about.
So Kyle, what you're telling me is that if there's a traps agent on an endpoint, that if it's able to even knock out one of the steps in a malware or an exploit, then we've effectively blocked that.
Yep. Yep. We typically see that we only need to knock out one stage of the attack lifecycle in order to stop a compromise from taking place.
Great.
Yep. So I'm going to show off a little bit of a demo that we have here as soon as I can get to my machine. Now this is a virtual machine. This is running on my laptop, and it's actually a virtual Mac environment. And what I've done here is, so that you can understand how I'm doing this, and trying not to do smoke and mirrors or anything like that for you. I'm just trying to automate it a little bit better. So I have built a script. It's a malware script that I run on this Mac demo. I built a script that has my API key into VirusTotal. And for those that you may not be familiar with VirusTotal, a lot of people use it to look up malicious files by hash or name or whatever it may be, and to look to see if how bad it is, if it's got some more intelligence. It's not quite as much in depth as the information that you can get from like our Wildfire and the Wildfire reports, but it's a decent repository of threat intel and malicious files. So I use my little API key to log into my VirusTotal account, and I ask it to pull down samples for me. So I'm going to pull down some malware samples. I'm going to exploit them on this Mac machine, and these are Mac virus samples, they call Mako files or Mako files, whatever you want to call them. And I'm going to detonate them on this machine. And then I'm going to go back to our traps console, and unless we need to do a little overview of the console first, I don't know. What do you think?
Sure, let's dive into that.
All right, let's check out the console. I want you to know what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. So this is, can everyone you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the newest version of our traps console. This is our hosted version, and this happens to be my own tenant where I play and do all my bad stuff, and I even actually use it to protect a lot of my family members and friends. They're loaded up on here as well. So you'll see a lot of my my VMs that I use for my lab testing, as well as maybe friends and family that are protected by this instance of traps.
And so in previous versions, Kyle, the ESM was on site, and in this latest version, we've moved that up to the cloud.
That's correct. So we really tried to make it easier for customers. You know, the last thing that we want you to do is have to worry about an application server, a database, and system accounts that connect to those, and keep them all up and running and patched, everything like that. Not that the ESM is or was a bad platform. It's still around. We still fully support ESM. We're adding the same feature parity, although it's not on the same cycle. Obviously, the hosted tenant's easier to push those updates and feature parity to, but we still have use cases for many customers that may be air-gapped on their network, and so they need something that can live in an environment that doesn't have an internet connectivity. So ESM is still fully functional, but most people just find it much easier to use the hosted client, and we've redesigned the interface to make it more intuitive as well. So yeah, that's what you're looking at here. This is my hosted tenant. You can see it's my name up there, chugger.traps.paloaltonetworks.com. So that's my tenant that we're looking at. It'll show you any incidents or security events that we prevented, and you can obviously change this time frame and that nature. Platforms that you've got coverage for right now, you've got 10 Windows clients, 4 Mac, and 1 Linux, how many licenses you have. And content versions, those are dished out every anywhere from 30 to 60 days. That's basically updates to our math algorithms or our machine learning capabilities, and those automatically come down to your clients as they're connected to the TMS, which is Traps Management System console. So that's what you see there. Security events, we'll dig into these a little bit more. These are some of the events that I've been running in my lab, and we'll create some new events soon, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what's there. File analytics is essentially all your hashes within your network that we've seen. and looked at. Gives you the capability to do some searches, and even if you had to try to manually change a verdict or ask us to do some more static analysis on an event. Endpoints, these are all the endpoints that are in your console that are reporting, and you can search by OS, by endpoint name, by groups. You can group them logically, and there's a lot of different capabilities there when it comes to how you manage your endpoints and how you put more granular policies around certain ones or certain groups, whether they're static or dynamic groups. I created a few groups here, mostly to keep my family members' endpoints away from my endpoints that I do bad stuff to. Agent installations are really easy. All you do is you build the packages for the newer versions. These are older packages. I've already deployed newer packages. 503 must be already out. That must have been new just recently, so I'll update those. But you basically build packages, and then you can deploy them either by a deployment technology, or you can actually just do it. Once the agent is on the system, you can just update them within the console if you want. And these agents will go on Windows machines all the way back to Windows XP and later. Mac, supporting the last 2 or 3 devs. We have over 8 distros of Linux that are covered. And we also support Android. That is pretty recent. We have an Android client, and we look at those APKs and do analysis of those within the Wildfire Cloud to let you know if you have any malicious APK packages on your Android machines or devices. We won't go through policy and profile and policy rules, but it's essentially where you build your profiles and you apply them to policies and apply those to groups. So it's how you can apply the different malware and exploit, or even restrictions. You can do restrictions like, okay, never let executables, packed executables detonate in your temp folder or whatever it may be. You can apply exceptions if you needed to. Process exceptions are more of for this exploit prevention module, don't impact this process because it may be a poorly written application or something of that nature.
So for example, Kyle, one of the policies you could have is to not let any executables run from any USB devices. Is that correct?
Yep, you can apply many different policies and very granular kind of blacklist or even whitelist policies if needed. You know, every environment's different, so you always have to have that capability that if we're going to bump into an application that's going to continually trip our exploit prevention modules, you have to have the capability to whitelist just that and put a small pinhole rather than opening it up wide, but you can just granularly put that process exemption in place so that you're not opening yourself up to compromise and having to disable a whole exploit prevention module for one application. And then you've got some logs in here. Well, in the next week or so, we're going to actually have some more functionality. And if you're interested in talking more about what's coming this next week and what's on, I can't do a lot of roadmap discussions here. I'm authorized to do roadmap discussions, but we have to do an NDA in place. So if you want to dig deeper into what's on the roadmap, we're happy to take that offline and meet with you. So that's what the dashboard looks like. So let's go ahead and let's get to my Mac lab environment, and let's run some of these scripts and pull down some brand new files. Now, I haven't set the stage. I'm not trying to skew these results at all. I'm pulling down fresh files, and I don't get to choose them. I'm not choosing them. I'm not bringing preloaded files in order to detonate in my environment. So we're going to run this script, and we're going to first run the Wildfire script, which basically pulls down new hashes and detonates them on this machine, and so we can show you the detection and prevention capabilities. So let's run this. Okay, so it's going to dump down 10 files, and this goes pretty quickly, depending on the bandwidth and everything like that. I'm just queuing up the downloads, and the demo gods are not happy with me today.
So generating that new hash will prompt some wildfire analysis. Is that correct, Kyle?
Yes.
And so with Wildfire, really we're gaining the benefit of those who were 0 days to be run and identified, and then have those pushed down to each of our agents so that we are not 0 days. So if there's a new exploit or new malware that was created by a script kiddie, right? And just one thing changed. Instead of a WannaCry.0.5, it's now a .0.7. That's going to have a new hash, although it's the same exploit, right? And so that will be evaluated and quickly sent down and really get protection onto the agent on the endpoint quicker than most alternatives.
Exactly.
Hey guys, might be a good time for a question here while we're getting that going. The question is it possible to effectively secure endpoints without ML or AI technology today?
I think that it is possible to protect that endpoint. If we can get just one of the steps in that process to break on the endpoint, then we've effectively secured it, right? Of all the different types, those 19 or so known exploits, if we just prevent one thing from happening in that chain, then that endpoint is protected. For example, if we've got a user that maybe opened some malware from an email, we didn't block it at the perimeter, somehow it got through, they weren't smart enough to know not to click on that email. There's all these different steps that have to happen for that malware or that exploit to be successful, and if we can stop one of them, being on the endpoint and preventing that malware from running, then we've done our job. For example, the traps agent will inject itself into the DLL of some of your Office applications and inspect what's going on there. Why is this Word document trying to run this code or execute this code, and should it be doing that? And if we can stop it there, then we've really made a big dent there. Kyle?
Thank you. You're going to need next generation techniques. And one of the reasons we've put so much effort and innovation into machine learning, behavior analytics, and so forth is to be able to, because the malware is propagating more and more. We really believe that it's difficult to fight cyber attacks with manual efforts anymore. It used to be you could hire a handful of guys and put them in your SOC and correlate events in a SIM and have those guys keep an eye on your environment. But with the automation, the bad guys, and the crowdsourcing and the compute power that they have now, their automation techniques is advancing quicker than we can respond. So response is becoming more difficult now, and I think you have to put automation and prevention capabilities in your environment, or you're not going to be able to keep up and scale to the amount of threats. All right, this apparently is not working for me right now. Let me actually show you. I did this live before I came, and so I want to show you kind of how it worked out with when I did it from my house. Quick overview of how this works. You're going to see local analysis file events in here, and you're going to see wildfire events. So when you see a wildfire malware, it means we already know about this hash. We've seen it before. We've detonated in our environment. We already have a verdict for it. And we're going to show you within this verdict. If malware tries to detonate, whether it's benign or malicious, we're going to have an event here, a hash, and give you more detail. And you can read up to it to your heart's content because there's a lot of details in our wildfire reports. You can pull down like a CSV file with a ton of data in it for analysis if you'd like. But wildfire, when I first run that script for wildfire, it pulls down fresh samples from VirusTotal, analyzes them, and say, okay, it'll check with wildfire and say, okay, have you already seen this? Yes or no. If it's seen it, we already have a verdict, and we're going to tell you right away, and either let it execute or not. Since I rehashed these files or morphed these files, they obviously have different hashes, and so wildfire has not seen it. So local analysis or machine learning takes over, and we look at over 300 characteristics and attributes of that file with our machine learning algorithm to give you an immediate verdict, whether that's malicious or benign. And in the meantime, we're also sending it up to wildfire to give a validation of that verdict and a second look at that verdict to make sure that we got it correct. Ultimately, wildfire is a few percentage points more more accurate, so that's kind of our judge and jury ultimately. But our local analysis gives you that immediate, so you're not sitting and waiting, so users aren't clicking on something like, oh, hold on, we got 5 minutes before wildfire gets back and lets you know if you can run this. We already will give you a verdict right away, and then we'll validate that with a wildfire analysis. So you get a lot of good information. So it's interesting, you can look here. If this file, our local analysis or machine learning gave it a verdict of malware, and then you can click on our Wildfire Report, and it also agreed. There are some in here. Let me see if I can find them really quickly. This was given a machine learning verdict of malware, but Wildfire actually said, no, it's benign. So Wildfire actually changed that verdict and it'll run in your environment. Are we always 100% right with machine learning? No, because all machine learning has a propensity to have some false positives to it. Although if you look at our latest NSS Labs report that was published about 3 months ago, we had 0 false positives in their test, and we had the highest efficacy of prevention and the lowest total cost of ownership. So there's a lot of value within traps. We recognize that you don't have all the time in the world, and you don't have 20 security guys at your disposal to watch your environment. That's why we focus on automating threat prevention and preventing known and unknown malware and exploits from running on your machine, so you can go on with your day and not spend time running around and putting out fires. So ultimately, you know, that's our goal, is to prevent malicious files, block exploits, stop sophisticated attacks, whether they're fileless type attacks, whether they're ransomware, whether they're crypto miners, whatever it may be. Traps is one of the best in the world. And coming soon, we acquired Secdo, which is EDR capability. We're going to integrate Secdo and not only give you best of breed prevention, but also incident detection and response, and more response capabilities than I can explain and talk about here, but I'm happy to do that on a roadmap call with anybody that's interested.
Hey guys, we've got a few questions here. Does this work with AirWatch MDM?
It can help and coexist with an MDM. There's not a lot of integration points within it, but it doesn't, MDMs don't have a problems on Android with traps running it. With iOS, there's always the walled garden. They don't allow agents really to sit in their kernel, so I don't see iOS coming anytime soon for traps, but it will exist and coexist and work fine with MDM. We have a lot of partners we integrate with, Proofpoint and several others that we integrate nicely with our APIs and things of that nature, but so yeah, no problems working with the MDM or conflicts with it.
And then what about Google Enterprise Suite? Does it work with that?
That's a good question. I haven't read any conflicts that we've had with the G Suite. Out of the box, we have default protection capabilities where we inject within the kernel and the application in order to have visibility into what like child processes are trying to maybe run and do malicious stuff with legitimate processes or executables. So we inject ourselves into many of the common applications that are exploited or that malware payloads run against. But you can also customize that. If you had a custom application you wanted just to inject in to prevent, we've got that capabilities too. But I have not seen any conflicts with G Suite.
And will the minimum number of licenses change?
Currently, the minimum, I believe, is at 250, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I know we are working on with several partners to do some hosted capabilities for smaller companies, and they may be able to use their tenant to be hosted under some multi-tenancy kind of capabilities, but that's not available currently.
Okay, kind of a hypothetical here. What's a major modern-day hacking news story out there in the past that traps you think could have prevented? Like Sony, Equifax, the Yahoo. Any thoughts on that one? It's kind of a hypothetical here.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of use cases for that. I'll go back a little bit at WannaCry because that's obviously one of the latest worst attacks. We had prevention capabilities in long before that exploit technique was ever known and became like a zero-day exploit. Well, we had protection in place long before that hit, and we also have ransomware capabilities. So even if the exploit worked, when the ransomware tried to detonate, we'll actually spawn a few of these phantom files, and we can tell when they're trying to be encrypted. So we gotta say, oh, look, this process is trying to encrypt these phantom files that we kind of put up. It's almost like a honeypot in a file. It's kind of interesting technology. So we'll like trick it to say, all right, try and encrypt me, and then when we detect that they're trying to be encrypted, we'll stop that from happening. We had a customer call us out of the Northwest who was a good partner customer of ours, but they had a subsidiary that had not moved to the firewalls and Traps solution for their subsidiary yet. Their subsidiary had a ransomware outbreak, and they were down to using like typewriters and cell phones basically to do all their work and handwriting everything. So we were able to jump in there and get Traps pushed out their agents and help minimize the impact of it spreading. Now, Traps isn't one of those when you set it on an infected box, it's going to make, rainbows and lollipops. It's not going to just remediate and bring the computer back to working perfectly. We're a pre-execution prevention technology, although we can detect a lot of post-execution activities. It helps when we're in place before the ransomware happened, so that didn't actually execute. Now with our SecDo technology, we have a little bit more capabilities on the response side as far as quarantining. You can isolate endpoints and things of that nature, so they can only talk to the console and so forth. But we have a lot of success stories into what we've been able to block before it was ever known, and we do. Our efficacy of prevention is up in the 97, 98 percentile. So there's not much that we don't prevent. And with all of our exploit prevention modules, we believe with our Unit 42 threat research team that continues to monitor the different malware or exploit campaigns, we continue to make sure that we're still staying up on the recent exploit prevention techniques so that we can add them to if we need to. So we've had a lot of success in blocking stuff that has not been known when it comes out.
Okay, great. Is there a performance hit, do you know, with the agents on the host?
Currently, we're one of the lightest weight in the industry. We're less than 2% of processor, and at most, I see about 75 megabytes of memory. So that's very lightweight with industry. When we add our EDR capabilities, obviously that will spike a little bit. We're proud of how lightweight we are and how we are very capable without inundating your customers with slowing down their machine and using half their processor and memory. So very lightweight.
Okay, and can you use Panorama with Traps?
Currently, we're still working with Traps hosted client logs all your data to our logging service in the cloud. So if you want that data, currently we can set up a forwarding and send that syslog forwarding to your environment, to your SIM if you wanted to parse it. Right now we're still working with our Panorama connectors from our logging service and TMS to get that working. If you were still using, if you're an ESM customer, which is the on-premise Traps environment, it natively works to push those events in Panorama, but we're still working on that with our cloud-hosted environment, so not currently.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the last slide there, Q&A. We'll put up Robert's contact information. I've got one final question here. Do we need Palo Alto Networks firewalls to run Traps?
You do not. Traps does a very good job in standalone. In fact, a lot of the times when we're working with new accounts that have never been a Palo Alto customer, we've had, I don't know, 20–30% of them that will start with Traps. The other 70% typically will start with the firewall. Obviously, we're known very well for our next generation firewalls because we're the industry leader, probably by a long shot, to be honest with you. The Traps, even though it's very capable and it's up there in those top solutions against our competitors, we still come into a lot of environments where Traps is their first, dipping the toe into the Palo Alto water, so to say, Palo Alto Networks water, so to say. But yeah, works alone very well. And, whether you have the firewalls or whether you have Traps, you still talk to the same Wildfire Intelligence cloud.
Okay, great. And the final question is for you guys. Who do you think gave the best question today? I want to give that backpack out before we wrap things up here. So who had the best question? And then I've also got a couple of hiking water bottles here from Camelback I want to give away as well today. So which is the top one and then the two runners up?
Well, who wants to bribe me first? No, I actually love the one because I like bringing things back to what's going on in the environment. The one question that whomever the participant asked about, how does Traps do about the emerging threats, or what kind of examples has Traps been capable or available or been there to prevent those unknown threats and those big attacks in the news. So I like
okay, so the major modern day hacking news story, that was Dustin E. You're the winner of the OGO backpack. We'll get that out to you. Any others you guys can think of as well? Let's give away those 2 water bottles. Any others that you can remember?
The MDM question was a good one for interoperability.
Okay, the AirWatch MDM.
And I like the one where they asked, I think it's important for people to understand. So if someone asked, I don't know if I can say it verbatim, but do you need like heuristics and machine learning to be able to block modern day threats? So I think that one is a good question, because you can't rely on, we have many of our competitors that rely on 1 or maybe 2 of those capabilities. I really think you have to have that, the machine learning, you have to have the malware intelligence, and you have to have the exploit techniques to have a product that can really do what you need it to do. Because if you rely on 1 of those few pieces, then you're missing quite a few threats in your environment.
Okay, then Aaron K. and Daryl C., we're going to send those water bottles out to you. So thanks for asking all those questions. Dustin, the OGO backpack, it's the holiday weekend, so you should see it next week. Robert, Kyle, any other comments before we wrap things up here?
It's been wonderful to talk with you guys today. We'd like to thank Kyle for his time today, and like it's been mentioned, Traps is really important. It's part of your security lifecycle. It's something that you need to make sure that you understand and can put in place effectively.
I appreciate NCSI. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate Robert and NCSI having me out, and they're great to work with. They're literally down the road. They let me drop in and use an office whenever I need to and feed me. They're great guys, and I appreciate their time. So if you want to talk more about Traps, obviously reach out to Robert and your NCSI rep, and we'll get either myself or some of my counterparts, depending on where you live, out to visit you, and we can stand up an eval tenant and show you the value.
And the kitchen is always full here as well, too, so feel free if you're local to come on by. Otherwise, we'll come and see you. I'm going to put the link to the YouTube channel up again one more time. Go ahead and subscribe to that. We will get this recording up on our website by next Tuesday. Robert, Kyle, thank you for the demo today. We appreciate it. Like I said, we'll get that up. And everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for making this summer camp an awesome summer camp. We'll do it again next summer. And you're getting your hats and sunscreens. And if you attended 2 or more, there's a T-shirt coming your way as well. So thanks again from NCSI, and have a great holiday weekend, everybody.